Today in our health segment, we are talking about hypertension, which at the moment is currently being said to be the number one killer disease in the country. And according to the Ghana Health Service, most of the deaths, or a high percentage of deaths that occur at Kolebu, is as a result of hypertensive conditions. And today with me in the studio, I've got Dr. Alan Steele-Dadsey, who's a family physician from the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. How are you this morning?
Very well.
Okay, so we keep hearing the term hypertension. What is hypertension?
Yes, it's important for everybody out there to understand what hypertension is, because as you said, it's really a big health issue now. And when we say hypertension, the common man's term for hypertension is high blood pressure.
Right.
When we say high blood pressure, what it means is, in the body, the heart pumps blood. And this blood is conveyed around the body. And the purpose of that is to transport nutrients and other vital things the body needs around the body. But as you would agree, when the heart pumps blood, the blood is supposed to, for the blood to reach various parts of the body, it has to travel with a certain pressure. But this pressure is supposed to be within a certain range. If the blood pressure exceeds that range, then it begins to harm the body. So when we say high blood pressure, that is the pressure at which the pressure that begins to harm the body. And practically,
as if the pressure is too much.
The pressure is too much.
What about when it's too little?
When it's too little, that means that the blood cannot be conveyed to the body as much.
But that is not hypertension. That's a different condition.
Yeah, we typically call that hypotension.
Okay.
Yes.
So when it's too much.
When it's too much, yes. And practically, in the hospital, when we check the blood pressure, too much is when the recording is 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury. So you realize that there are two figures, the one on top and one at the bottom.
These are figures for when it is too much.
That is when it's too much. When it's 140 over 90 or more.
Okay.
Sometimes you can have only the top value being more. And the lower value is normal.
What does that mean?
Hypertension.
It's still hypertension.
Or you can have the lower value being normal, but
you mean the upper one
being normal? The upper one being normal, and the lower one
exceeding 90.
That is also hypertension.
So what is the average? What should it be?
Normally, a person's blood pressure should be less than 120 over 80.
Okay.
Yes.
What about when it's below? Is there a certain mark that it shouldn't go below?
We don't expect the blood pressure to be less than 80 over 50. In that case, the blood cannot be conveyed around the body.
That is the hypotension.
Hypotension.
Right.
Yes.
So 120 over 80 is fine.
It's fine.
Okay. Anything around that region.
Yes.
Okay.
And you'd also notice that, as I said, hypertension is 140 over 90. So the question is, what happens in between? Because there's certainly a gap between 120
and 140.
That is the stage that is called pre-hypertension. It is not hypertension yet, but that is also a health concern, because it's been found out that people who have that blood pressure range are likely to develop hypertension. They are more likely to develop hypertension in the near future than people who have normal blood pressure, that is less than 120 over 80.
Okay. Yes. So you're saying that high blood pressure causes hypertension?
High blood pressure is a common man's term for hypertension.
So what are the main causes? Like, for example, can excessive anger? You keep hearing people say excessive, if you're getting angry or getting worked out. It's like, you get hypertension, you get hypertension.
That's what people
So what really causes it?
Yes, exactly. To understand the causes of hypertension, it's important to know the classification of hypertension. There are two main types of hypertension. What we call primary or essential hypertension, and then secondly, what we call secondary hypertension. The primary hypertension is hypertension that does not have an identifiable cause. So a person's blood pressure is high, but you really can't pinpoint a cause and say that this is what is causing them.
Why is that so? Why can't you find the cause?
Yes, that is about how the body behaves. Yes, how the blood pressure is regulated becomes abnormal for reasons that are not known. But even though the causes are not known, we know there are factors that contribute. They are not definitely the causes, but they contribute. They increase a person's risk of having hypertension, and we call those risk factors. And as I mentioned, there are also secondary hypertension. There's secondary hypertension, and that is hypertension that has a definite cause. But interestingly, about 90 to 95% of cases of hypertension are primary. Okay. That means that you cannot put your finger at a cause.
Right. So with the secondary, what are some of the causes?
The secondary, the commonest cause by far is kidney problems. The interesting relationship between hypertension and kidney problems is that hypertension can cause kidney problems, and then kidney problems can also cause hypertension. But when it is the case that kidney problem is causing hypertension, then it becomes a secondary hypertension.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah. So what is the current state of hypertension in Ghana? Do we have any figures at all? I mean, we're being told that it's the number one killer disease.
Public. The situation is that, studies that have been put together for quite a period of time shows that the prevalence of hypertension in Ghana ranges between 19 to 48%. So that means that in some parts of the country, you can have an adult population that has as high a prevalence rate as 48%. That means that if you take every 100 adults walking out there, as many as 48% of them could be hypertensive.
Wow.
So that's how bad it
Without
is.
their knowledge.
Without their, not necessarily, a large proportion of them wouldn't know. And what is even worrying is that the trend is increasing. In the past, it wasn't so. Some 40 years ago, a study that was done in 1973 indicated that the prevalence of hypertension in the rural areas of Ghana was about 2 to 5%, I should say. But 30 years down the line, that is early 2000, another study was done in rural Ghana, and it was found out that the prevalence had shot up to as high as 30%. So that should be worrying for all of us.
Indeed, it is frightening.
Yes.
So who is at risk of getting hypertension? Is it a disease for the aged, or young people can also be hypertensive?
It is a disease that rises with age, but young people can get hypertension, even though it is not common. Only last week I had an 18-year-old girl who we diagnosed as having hypertension.
So 18?
18 years.
So what would be the cause for that one?
We investigated her, and unfortunately, or let's say fortunately, we didn't find a particular cause. So she also falls into the category
primary.
Of primary. And that is rather interesting.
What about the myth that excessive anger causes hypertension? Is that true?
Not exactly. Anger is not a definite cause of hypertension, but what may be observed is that if somebody has hypertension, blood pressure is more likely to rise when we have outbursts of anger.
Right.
Yes.
What about obesity?
Obesity is a very important risk factor for hypertension. People who are obese are more likely, and that has been confirmed in all the studies that I've done in the country and elsewhere, that the more obese you are, the more likely that
the risk of
come down, you'll have hypertension.
What about smokers?
Smoking is a very important contributory factor. Other important contributory factors are alcohol and then also diet. And what is significant about diet is excess salt intake. Yes. One would ask whether fats or cholesterol and then sugar contribute to hypertension. But the fact is that they don't directly contribute to hypertension. But when you have hypertension and you indulge yourself in eating lots of fat and sugar, the likelihood that you have complications of hypertension is rather higher.
Right. Yes. I've also read a few times situations where excessive sex also led to hypertension. Is that true? Is there any truth to it?
But I don't think that has been confirmed by any.
But is there the likelihood of having excessive sex leading to hypertension?
No, I don't think so. No. It's not been proven scientifically.
Okay. What about diabetes?
Diabetes and hypertension are, in a way, bedfellows.
Okay, sort of like the kidney and the...
Exactly. If you have one, the likelihood that you have the other is very high. And if you have both of them, you are in a bigger trouble than if you have either of them. Okay. So diabetes, though, is not really a cause of hypertension. If you have the two of them together, then the likelihood that you have complications of, the two of them is high.
Okay. Yes. Are there any other health diseases or conditions that arise out of hypertension?
Yes, and that's what makes hypertension very dangerous. Hypertension itself, what is frightening about it is that it doesn't have symptoms. Mm-hmm. Typically, if your blood pressure is high, you will not know.
Until you've gone to hospital
and checked. And in fact, studies that I've done have confirmed that. There was one study that showed that of the number of people who have hypertension in Ghana, as many as 70% of them didn't know that they have hypertension. But if you have hypertension, the most common complications that you would have are one, stroke. Hypertension is a leading cause of stroke, and in our hospitals, the vast majority of our stroke patients have a stroke because they're hypertensive. Yeah. And then also, let me say that hypertension affects these vital parts of the body. The brain, that's where the stroke comes in. The heart. Hypertension can cause two main problems in the heart. One is that the heart can fail. When we say the heart has failed, that means that it doesn't mean that the heart has stopped working totally. What it does mean is that the heart is not working at its optimum. So you begin to have symptoms that suggest that your heart is not really working. And the other one is what we call heart attacks.
Okay.
Heart attack is, it arises when not enough blood flows through to your heart. So the heart muscles begin to sort of die. Okay. So you can imagine having a heart that is dead. And then another important complication of hypertension is on the kidneys. As I said earlier, hypertension can cause kidney failure and then vice versa. Exactly.
Okay. I know you just said something about there's no known symptoms or direct symptoms. So there's nothing at all that can trigger you to think that maybe you have high blood pressure or hypertension. Are there any symptoms at all? Maybe a headache here and there or something?
Yes. In fact, the likelihood that a person will have symptoms with hypertension is very small. In fact, less than 1% of people who have hypertension have symptoms attributed to the high blood pressure itself.
Okay, what are some of these symptoms?
As you mentioned, headaches. Headaches is one of the likely symptoms, and characteristically, the headache that arises from hypertension is felt early in the mornings, and it's normally at the back of the head. Yes, that's what we call.
How frequent would you get these? Frequently, would you get these headaches?
It's not common for people to experience this headache. If somebody who has high blood pressure is experiencing headache, it's more likely to be from other causes than the hypertension itself.
I'm saying with the headaches itself, how frequently would it manifest?
No, if it occurs,
is it every day?
It's variable. I think everybody will have variable experience.
Okay. What about irregular heartbeat? Some people have said that irregular heartbeat can mean that you have high blood pressure. Is that true?
Not exactly. Very rarely. There's what we call palpitation. Palpitation means that you become aware that your heart is beating. Normally, when the heart is beating, you're not supposed to
hear it or be aware.
But when you become aware, it is
it beats a bit more loudly than it's supposed to.
No, you just feel that the heart is beating. As we sit here, I'm sure you don't feel.
No, I don't feel my heart beating.
I don't either. Okay. But when you become aware that your heart is beating,
that is a sign.
It could be. It's not exactly a sign, but it could be.
Okay. Yes. So it's good to have it checked out. Any other symptoms?
Those are really the symptoms. Very rarely, you may also have nosebleeds from hypertension. Okay. I think that's the commonest I have seen in my practice. I think I've seen about not more than 5 hypertensives come down with nosebleeds. Okay. And even though it's quite difficult to attribute those circumstances definitely to the hypertension, it's a recognized symptom of hypertension.
Okay. Doc, now what are some of the treatments available for treating this disease?
Yeah, the treatment of hypertension is classified into 2. We have the non-drug treatment and then the drug treatment. By non-drug treatment, those are measures that you may adopt that will help lower your blood pressure. Okay. And they are not necessarily drugs. And
so basically just a lifestyle changes.
Lifestyle changes, and they normally are targeted at your diet, modifying your diet, and also exercising. And then in addition to this, you also have drug treatment.
Okay.
And there are so many drugs that are out there for people who have hypertension that are really effective.
Okay, with the lifestyle changes, can you give us a few examples of what exactly you can do? Maybe for diet, for example, is there any particular foods we should be avoiding or eating more of?
Exactly. So as you said, there are some diets that you should avoid, and there are some that you should ensure that are a part of your diet routinely. What you should avoid, when I was in school, to remember these things, I used to have an abbreviation to be noted that, and that is FSS.
FSS?
Yes. F for fat, S, the first S for salt, and then the second S for sugar. So
you avoid fat, you avoid salt,
you
and you avoid
the
sugar?
word is not total avoidance,
okay,
but cut down, avoid excessive amounts of those things, especially salt.
Okay.
Yes.
So all these things can help to control
exactly.
the disease. Can it be treated? Can treatment make it go away completely, or is just to control it?
That's a very good question, I should say. And that is one point that so many people who are being treated for hypertension get wrong. Hypertension, unfortunately, is a chronic disease. And a chronic disease means that it's a disease that doesn't go away. It really never goes away, except in a few circumstances where hypertension is secondary.
Wow.
So a person, unfortunately, once diagnosed with hypertension, will have to be on treatment for life. And that is one of the things that make people not comply much with the medication.
Wow. So all these things that you said just basically control it, but
exactly.
they don't make the disease go away.
And one point about that is that, sometimes people who have hypertension go to the hospital and they are given medication for hypertension. But they are not made to understand that
it's not going to cure it.
It's for a purpose, it's for a target. The treatment, the purpose of being on the treatment for hypertension is not just to be on the drugs, but it's to bring your blood pressure below 140/90. And that's where a lot of even health workers miss. Because people they come to hospital from time to time and nobody really insists that the blood pressure should be brought to a value that is less than 140.
I think that's one of the first things that the nurses do when you go to the hospital for whatever illness that you have. They take your temperature and then your blood pressure, maybe height and all those things. I think it's one of the basic things that they do. So with whatever ailment you may have, immediately you get to the hospital, that's one of the first things that is checked.
Yes, it's important that it becomes the practice of every hospital so that these cases are picked up. I remember there was a young man who came to our hospital because he had been assaulted. He was coming for a police form. And then when we checked his blood pressure, it was 220/something.
Wow.
So, he didn't have any symptom at all. But the routine of checking people's blood pressure when they come to hospital picked it up.
Right.
So it's something that should be established in all our health facilities. And people should also acquire the habit of going to hospital for regular checks. Yes.
Not just when you have sickness or anything.
Exactly.
Thank you ever so much, Dr. Alan Steele Dadzi, family physician from Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Very insightful discussion this morning. So this has been the health segment. We discussed hypertension, #1 killer disease in the country at the moment. So make sure that you do get checked out.